Good afternoon, everybody. Hope everybody's had a nice lunch. And welcome to Aristotle Accelerated, our kind of new format for delivering these webinars to basically share like new and updated and refreshed features in the Aristotle platforms, and making people aware of really good practices around government data management. So this is again a little bit of a new format. The idea for today is we're going to run through a little bit of a background on why data is important, and then we're going to be looking at a couple of exciting new features in the Aristotle metadata registry, which I think are going to be really useful for users of the platform. I think because we're still just right at 1 o'clock, I'll give a brief introduction to myself, as we admit a few extra attendees as we get them out of the waiting list, and then we'll get kick-started with the agenda. So by way of an introduction, my name's Sam Spencer. I hope everybody can hear me. So if you can hear me, give me a thumbs up. I always like the user engagement. There we go. Fantastic. So my name's Sam Spencer. I'm Chief Executive Officer of Aristotle Metadata, and I'm one of the people responsible for new product developments across the Aristotle Metadata platforms. Today, what we're going to be talking through is ways to build trust in corporate assets and build trust in corporate data inventories. And we're going to look at it from two lenses. So on today's agenda, what we're going to look at is we're going to look at a little bit of an understanding around what a data inventory is and how they're useful for our organizations, and really talk about how we talk about our data inventory with the rest of the organization as well. So the first half of this talk, or the first 10 minutes of today's presentation, are going to be really on best practice. What can we do as an organization to make others be aware of what data is being collected in our environment? The second thing we're going to do is going to be very Aristotle specific, as we kind of do here, is we're going to be looking at things that we've done to implement that best practice into Aristotle. So what we're going to be looking at is, not only are we going to be talking about why is the data inventory important, we're going to talk about how we can communicate that and how Aristotle supports it. The two things that the things that we're going to be looking at for around that are going to be looking at how we customize the landing page of our system using a few new features for homepage development. We'll be doing a little bit of a look at branding and logos. We'll have a look at some new custom fields we've added to support enhanced data documentation outside of the standards that we use within Aristotle. And then lastly, we're going to look at how we can actually use some new contact form functionality in Aristotle to start building really simple data request processes as a kickoff to next month's webinar as well. If there's time, I'll be staying on for Q&A afterwards. So I've actually got time blocked out after this session as well. So if there is follow-on Q&A around Aristotle or around best practice in data, we're more than welcome to stay, probably for an extra 10 minutes. But if you want to drop off at the half past point, feel free to drop off, and we'll share all the videos after this as well. So to get started, I wanted to talk about a couple of really baseline things, because I think the value of what we do at Aristotle is talk about not only our own product, but what we can do within our organizations to help people just really engage with data in a better way. And the first thing that I wanted to talk about is, what is a data inventory? Because I think this is a really big topic across government and across the private sector at the moment. But a lot of people aren't saying why we're now doing this new activity. I think a data inventory is also a term that's used in a couple of different ways. So the idea is to just get us started with this idea of what is a data inventory. So a data inventory can be thought of in two ways, as both a noun and as a verb. So it's actually a couple of different things. A data inventory as a noun is basically a central record for where all of our data exists within, of all of the data that exists in our organization. So a data inventory is separate to things like a data lake, in the sense that often when we think about a data lake, that's where we put all of our data. An inventory is just a way of knowing what we hold across the rest of the organization. One of the really important things is that it's a standardized snapshot as well. So the idea is that we should be collecting the same information about our data consistently. So that should mean that we have a really good profile and a really good understanding of what we're collecting about our data. Oftentimes we tell people you start with a name and a definition. A name and a definition and a contact point for our data inventory for all of our data assets is a really good starting point for knowing what's available. But the important thing is that your organization actually understands all of the fields that are of interest to you. If you're in the Australian federal sector, you've often heard of things like the ONDC 26, where they've set up a list of attributes and said every data asset needs to have these things collected against it. Similarly, at a states and territory level in government, we see that as well. And now with things like the consumer data right, even private sector organizations are now starting to have to understand everything about what their data means. So there's starting to become this really big impetus to kind of, actively manage all of this information. The other thing is that we often use the term data inventory as a verb as well. We often think about inventorying things that we own, and our data is included in that. So a data inventory is also the activity of just going off and getting all of this information. So the challenge is making sure that we can find everybody, and that activity becomes a bit of an iterative process. So the more we talk with people, the more we find that data, and the more we really need to understand how that idea of what that standardized information is can change over time. So the idea is that the data inventory, to sum it up, is two things. It's the activity of going off and getting a list of all of the data that we own, and then it's holding that list of data that we own in a centralized way that people can use to find all of that information. So why is it important, and why do we talk about it in the sense of it being a corporate asset? Is because it's basically a list of everything we do. We don't often, unless we're a statistical organization, we don't set out to collect data. We get data by the activity of doing our normal business. We get data today, so Aristotle's collecting data today because we have a list of participants. Organizations collect data when they deliver programs or when they help service clients. The idea is that data can be used in a number of ways, and when we don't treat it effectively, we can't use that information that we're collecting to achieve the outcomes we need to. So it's really a big communications tool that tells the rest of the organization, what do we actually do? What are we doing across our organization to make sure we're managing all of this information? And that's why understanding how our data fits with our communication strategy and fits with our corporate style guides is really important, because when we can build trust in our data by making it look and feel like other corporate assets, it becomes really useful for those in the organization to know that it's an official source of information. And often when we start thinking about data and data sharing, we start to see that this needs to be managed from an internal and from an external perspective as well. How do people outside the organization who need to know about the data that we're collecting know that this is an official source? What can we do in that first instance to build trust? So again, one of the things that we need to focus on here is the ability for us to make sure that whenever we're publishing this information, we're putting it out in a way that not only captures the information that's necessary, but we're also publishing it in a way that really enhances the trust of the organization and lets people know that this is an authoritative source of information. So what do we do around that? So how can we actually do that? So the question here is like, what can we do to make sure that our data fits in with those style guides? And the first answer is find the official style guide. Often many organizations and many mature organizations will have official guidelines to follow when it comes to the development of web pages and when it comes to the development of official documentation. That becomes a really strong point for us to go to say, when we make our data inventory look like it fits with the rest of the organization, the rest of the organization will understand that it is an authoritative source of information for everybody to use. Secondly, we need to provide information and resources to users to know what they need to do when it comes to the delivery of this documentation back to us. One of the challenges that we see is a lot of times users don't know exactly what they need to do or what information they need to collect when it comes to a data inventory, because what I consider to be important may be different to what other sections consider to be important. This is why the development of official standards and kind of, corporate standards for data requirements using the language that we all understand within the organization is important. And then lastly, we need to give users a way to contact us for more information. And this one feels like a bit of a kind of a very obvious response, but making sure that whatever we do to publish our inventory comes with appropriate contact information so that users know where to go to get extra information is a really important step in making sure that users know how to get the additional private context for that data that's necessary. So to sum up, like before we kind of jump into the demo, the idea is that we want to start looking at our data from 3 different lenses. One, we want to start building that data inventory out. We want to start making sure that all users are understanding their responsibilities in the collection of this data. How do we make sure that users know what their responsibilities are? Second of all, we want to make sure we have avenues for publishing this information. So what can we do to make sure that when we do publish our inventory, it does meet all of the guidelines that we've been talking about? And then lastly, we want to make sure that as a part of that process, we have a connectivity back into the rest of the organization. So that when I have questions about data, or when I want to make changes, or I want to make updates to the inventory, I have appropriate mechanisms for doing that as well. When we bring all those 3 together, what we have is not only a snapshot of data across our organization, but a way for us to build trust and also make sure that it becomes a living document so that we don't get into a position where we're missing or not knowing about information across the rest of the organization. So the question is, I've told you a bunch of things you should be doing. How can you do them? Well, today we're not going to do Excel. We're just going to jump into a whole bunch of Aristotle specific stuff. And these are a bunch of really cool features we've been building over the last month to actually put these things into practice. So what can we do to make sure that all these things that are important for understanding our data can actually be achieved through the Aristotle Metadata Registry? So with that, it's demo time. So this is my favorite part of these. I love these webinars. This is my favorite part is where we're going to jump in and we're actually going to show some stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to bring up my webinar registry and I'm going to start sharing my screen again. So be prepared with that audience participation thumbs up. Can everybody see my training webinar registry? We've got a hands up from Robin. All right, fantastic. All right, well, with that in mind, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get started with the live demo of what we're looking at. So what we can see here is a very generic Aristotle metadata registry. This is what every client gets. If you've started with us recently, you get given what is a very basic looking site that kind of drives users to where they need to be. And what we're going to look at today is ways to tailor this in some pretty extreme ways. So what we're going to look at is ways to make this look and feel more like a corporate asset to really get it in front of users and make sure that they're aware of what they can do. To do that, I'm going to show you a couple of really cool features. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by going to my dashboard, and we're going to go down to a new area in our cloud dashboard that's designed for our homepage editor. So this isn't something that's restricted to certain users with web access permissions, but the idea is we're building in tools for our web accessibility gurus to start building out more content through these to really start, changing the homepage to make it look and feel like they need. When I open the homepage editor, we've actually included a number of different options. As you can see, we've got a safe editor that's designed for users who aren't super familiar with web technologies like HTML or CSS. And then we've got our fully fledged HTML editor, which is really designed for, code gurus who love to get in there and hack and kind of change things and make them look like their own. The other thing that we've added is these 2 sets of options around how that HTML is interpreted. So we've kept in there our safe mode. So everything in Aristotle is designed to remove potentially dangerous tags, but we've added in an unrestricted mode as well that allows users to put in any content they need for that homepage to really make it look and feel like their own system using their own style guide. The other thing that we've done is we've added a couple of options around how that content's going to get embedded. So it can either be within our standard Aristotle homepage, just in a header or footer, or without any wrapping at all. And we're going to show that one last to show you how you can kind of unlock a completely refreshed homepage designed to look and feel exactly like your system. So I'm not going to type this out fully line by line. I've actually got a couple of pre-prepared examples that I think are pretty neat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to represent like an untrained user who just wants to do a little bit of customization, a little bit of tailoring around how this content could be developed. So I'm going to go into safe mode and I'm going to edit the homepage using a safe editor. And as you can see, we get a really nice, what you see is what you can get, rich text editor that allows us to start pulling that content in. We can add in tables, we can add in images, we can add all the regular content that we've got throughout the system. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly load in an example. So I'm going to paste in an example that I prepared earlier that just builds a small table of representative screenshots that are going to help me illustrate to users what's available within the registry. So I've built a little bit of a table here, and I'm just going to do a quick preview of that before I save those changes. So I can see exactly what's going to be changing before I save it, and I'm pretty confident with that now. So I'm going to save that homepage. Now, if I go to my homepage, what I'll see is I've now changed that homepage so that all of those additional boxes, all those standard boxes have been pushed down to the bottom of the page. I've now got a series of clickable images that are driving me off to things that I think my users would find necessary. And if I wanted to, I can continue to go back here to the editor and continue to refine that information as well. This is really designed for users who have a familiarity with things like Word or Excel and want to start documenting a little bit of information and tailoring their site to be a little bit more useful for them. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove some of that now, and I'm going to say, well, I'm a user who actually understands a little bit more, and I want my homepage to be really specific for my organization, and I'm just going to keep the Aristotle header and footer. When I save that now and refresh my homepage, what I can now see is all of the standard context has been removed. So as you can see, it gives you a little bit more control, but it's kind of nudged it off the screen. But I have kept my header and my standard footer as well. So it's designed again to take you a little bit further to make sure your homepage is doing exactly what you think is necessary. Now, I'm going to go one step further with this and go, I think I know exactly what I'm doing. And I want my homepage to look and feel exactly like my style guide that my organization uses. So I want to completely redo the homepage and use none of the originals. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to my unrestricted mode, and I'm going to edit the homepage using the HTML editor. Now, it looks like a lot of code. We don't need to go through everything here because all we really need to know here is this is designed for people with a web development background to start inputting all the necessary information for them to tailor this site to look exactly like they want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch now to my big complex example, and I'm going to paste that in because this would take me ages to load. And I'm just going to click preview. Now, when I click preview, you can see like the page has basically changed. What I've done is I've taken an existing style guide that was developed for the Australian government because, I'm Australian and we do a lot of work with government, just to kind of showcase exactly how much of this can change. So the idea here is now when I save this without any wrapping, what it's going to do is it's going to completely change that home page. So when I refresh the page, it's changed entirely. So the idea is it's designed to make sure that that first interaction that users have with the platform is designed to give them all the information they need up front using styles that they're familiar with. It's also designed to allow us to put all the links in there and access all that functionality so users can do everything they need to kind of tailor this to their specific needs before users get into the rest of the application. We haven't started doing this across the entire site. I know that's a question people are going to be asking, but we are looking at ways to tailor the rest of the styling for the site to again, continue that consistent look and feel. But for now, it's just the home page. But again, it gives us a really good first point of engagement to build that trust in the organization, to build that trust in the data before we start moving and looking in at our data inventory, which takes us to our next kind of segue in the show and tell for today, is looking at ways we can capture more documentation in a more customized way. So everything today is all about customization. And to do that, I'm going to jump into my browse page and I'm going to start looking at some data sets that I've started to document in here or had somebody help me document in here. I haven't done everything for this. I had a lot of help getting this webinar prepped. So what I've started to do is I've started to document data assets in the organization so that I know what's available. When I click under my basic included kind of browse view, what I can see is I can start to see names and descriptions for the data that's been collected. What I'm going to look at is I'm going to look at my survey response data that's been collected from a survey that I performed against users. And I can see it's captured a little bit of that standard information that's available in Aristotle. So if you've come to one of our webinars before, you'll know Aristotle's built on open standards, it's built on ISO standards, and it's designed to make sure that everybody within the Aristotle community is collecting data in a nice, consistent fashion. But sometimes we want to go a little bit beyond what's available within the standards, and we've got support for that too. So when I go backwards, we've actually prepared an example for our employee information data set that starts to capture a little bit more. So again, I can see I've got a contact point, I've got a frequency, I know when this data was last refreshed, so I can start to analyze my workforce data really effectively. I know who's been collecting it and why. But if I scroll down, I can start to see we've also added in a list of custom fields as well. So what I've got is, again, something that we've had for a while but have recently refreshed, is the ability for us to add in new custom fields and newly structured custom fields so I can capture more information. What I can see here is I can see that this is highly sensitive data. It's about a list of employees. I can see the next date of update, and I can also see a really cool table of data owners. Now, previously, we've been able to capture this as rich text. We've been able to put in HTML tables, but now we've actually got the ability to capture more information in a more structured way. So shout out to the dev team who built this. This is pretty amazing. I like this one. What I'm going to do is to show you how that's edited and to show you how that's controlled, I'm going to open my item editor. And I'm going to go to the slots tab, which is where my custom fields are stored. And if you're new to Aristotle, you may not be aware of this, but if you've used Aristotle for a while, you may notice that this list is now expanded, and we've got a really nice table of information about all of my data owners. I've got a name, I've got a position, and I've got a contact email, and that's consistently managed all the way through. We've got these nice little controls that allow us to reorder each of these fields. And then we've also got our continued kind of custom fields around dates and rich text as well. And as you can see, we've got this option to edit this information as JSON. And this is what's giving us the ability in the platform to now capture any structure of data that's necessary to kind of sit alongside our data. The way that we do that is by going to our custom fields editor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch back to my administrative view and show you how we've set this up and how you can set this up yourselves as well. So this is a bit of a short version because it's a really short webinar, but if you have any questions, we'll be putting some stuff up through the community as well. So I'm going to go to my dashboard. I'm not going to save my changes, and I'm going to go down to my administrator tools this time. So under my administrator tools, I have an option to manage custom fields, and this is where that capability comes into play. Against every different asset type in the registry, so against all asset types or against individuals, we can actually control these additional fields that users can add in. This is what leads to that standardization. This is how we can make sure that we've got a really standardized approach for collecting our data. When I edit this list, I can see those 3 additional fields are now showing up. When I expand them, I can see my next update is stored as a date, pretty consistent, exactly what you'd expect. I've got my sensitivity, which is managed as a rich text field, so I can control from here different choices, whether it's a date field, whether it's text. And this last one is this structured data, which we're going to show now. The latest thing that we've added into Aristotle is the ability for us to capture custom fields as structured data, which allows us to capture not only a single field, but repeatable lists, dictionaries, and really controlled, strongly typed controlled vocabularies, so users pick from a list of options rather than just putting anything they need to. What this allows us to do is it allows us to build those really cool tables. Now, it looks a bit scary, but that's because everything powerful comes with a little bit of a headache. So what we've got through the platform now is the ability for us to add what we call a schema associated with that field and an editor layout associated with that field. These allow us to add in all the different properties and their obligations. So is it a required field? Are they optional fields? Are they conditional on certain other fields? And then also defining the layout as well. These are based on 2 open standards. So one's called JSON Schema, one's called JSON Forms, that basically allow us to set up really consistent user interfaces within the platform for data collection. When we interact with these through things like APIs, they come out of a nicely piece of structured data. But for end users who actually want to see them, we've also got the ability to add in additional customized templates. And this is what's going to be adding some new features later on in this year around customizing the entire layout of some of those data collection forms. But the idea is for now, we've added it in for our custom fields, and we can actually control how this is structured. So even though it's being collected as like that weird list in the data in the entry form, we can actually control the look and feel and the layout of all those entries as they were captured, so that after a user has gone into their editor, I'll just jump back to the editor. Go. After a user started to control, add all this information into the editor, we can control how it's displayed when they go into their home page. So once they've started to add that information in, we can actually control that here as well. So to show you that, we'll just add a new one in, and I'll just add in me. So I'll add in a new field, and I'll go Sam Spencer. I'm the CEO, and well, this is all public knowledge. I can add my contact details in as well. And once I've saved those changes, it shows up in a nice consistent way down here at the bottom as well. So again, really building that consistency through the site. So what we've shown now is we've shown how to add those really new, really powerful custom fields. I think if you're a user of Aristotle, really big deal. If you're someone new into the platform as well, it's a way that we can use to capture all the necessary information so we don't lose data coming into the organization as well. So when we start migrating information in, got a lot of consistent ways to capture that data. Now, the last thing I want to show is a better way for contacting people as well. So one thing we love is we love email, but the challenge is that emails often go to people, not roles, and not shared inboxes. It's a bit of a challenge. So what can we do to start capturing that information as well? So this is designed really to support that interactivity between users who've seen the registry and want to ask questions. So to do this, rather than emailing any one of these people, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my homepage from the home button, and I've added this little contact us option here as well. Now, when I click this, it's going to take me to another page in Aristotle that's really simple, but it's got a lot of functionality behind the scenes that I've got to explain in 3 minutes. So what it's done is it's picked up my email address, and if I'd entered my name, it would have captured that here as well. So it's tied my contact form to this box here. And it's given me the ability to enter a message. So I'm going to say, hey, everybody, this is a demonstration. And I'm going to submit that form. It's going to capture that information, and it's going to give me a little thanks option. But what that's done behind the scenes is it's actually captured all of that within Aristotle. So if you've got this this challenge of making sure people who are using the registry know how to contact you, this is designed to solve that challenge. To show how that works, I'm again going to go back and switch to my administrator view. So I'm going to go into my dashboard. And under my admin tools, I've now got an option down the bottom that we're expanding out for all users, all administrators across the platform, and also adding permissions in for our web accessibility users as well to start managing this. But we can now actually add contact forms directly into the platform. When we open that up, I can see 2 contact forms have been added in, one for requesting information and one for doing a data request. So this is designed again to start us on that journey of doing data requests in a really nice managed way. What I can see is this contact form actually has a number of responses and it's open. So people can actually submit queries back to this. If I wanted to, I could close it so nobody was able to access it. And it also shows me the latest response that's come through. When I click in, I can now see all the different interactions that have come through the registry, and then I can go through and find additional details around it as well. When I go in and I look at one of these emails that's come through, what I can now see is I can see the full message, the date that it was submitted, any information about the user and whether or not they were associated with an account. So we can actually control who can actually receive these. And then I can see all the notes and responses that have come through against this request as well. So we can start capturing a lot of that information around users interacting with our metadata and interacting with our data inventory, again, in a nice standardized way. Because I'm contacting an external user, it's filled in a template for me. So this is configurable for each form. And then I can select whether or not I'm sending this externally or just saving it within the organization as well. The idea is it's, again, designed to make sure all the interactions with the registry can kind of stay in a centralized location so that when I send this, I'm going to send one off right now. Administrator. I can send a copy off to the user. I'll send a copy off to myself as well so that I can get a nice email version of that. And then once I've added the update, what I can see is I can see all the notes and responses that have been sent back and forth to somebody who's trying to interact with the system. The last thing that I want to show you here before we end today's seminar or webinar is the options that are available on this as well. So not only can we control the name and the messages around it, we can also control who forms are accessible to. So if we want certain forms only available to internal staff, we can control that. We can control whether or not a form is still open for responses. We can assign users. So if there's particular people that we want to be responding to these, we can. So we can actually control who the administrator of each individual form is, and then any additional email addresses necessary for notifications to go to. What I'm going to do is, now that it's officially 1:30, I think I've set through everything on my agenda, which is kind of spot on time. And I'm going to say to you all, thanks again for coming. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen there. I think, as I said, we were going to keep this to a really nice, tight 30 minutes. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to stay on for any Q&A, and I'll stop the webinar bit. We'll stop the recording here. And I'll go, are there any